All right, Jabbo, say good morning. Let us begin to thank our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, to thank Naftoli and Chava Tilson from Eretz Yisroel, with a thank you to Naftali's chaver Benjamin Wohl for introducing him to the Daf Yomi. May Hashem bless us all to finish the Daf Yomi cycle together and celebrate with the Siyum together in Eretz Yisroel. Amen. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Sivan, Baruch Meir and Rena Dubin. May Hashem continue to protect our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisroel, and may all of our children remain safe, complete their year of learning with a deep connection to the land and Hashem's Torah. All right, also with that, thank all of our sponsors for their generosity. A little better? Okay, excellent. You could stand up here and hold it, by the way, if you want to. You know, all right, so I was saying, good. Honestly, it's not better? Okay, so let's begin. So today's daf, thank you to Rabbi Kalman Akiva for giving yesterday's shiur. The beautiful daf ahead of us today, actually some very interesting halacha lamaisa as well. Mirat Hashem, if we get to it. So we are picking up, literally, today's daf is Memtes 49. We are picking up Mirat Hashem on the top of Memtes Meisvei. So remember again, we dealt with a statement of Rav Sheshes, right? They were asking the Shali from Rav Sheshes, what's the halacha if you do holacha bismol? Right? If you go ahead and, remember again, in the process of the avodah, there's shchita, shechting, Kabbalah, the reception of the dam, and then holacha. Now, holacha often is not explicitly stated. Often what happens is, kind of in our progression of avodah, we often go shchita, Kabbalah, that's what's usually next, zrika. But of course, again, remember, you have to get the blood from the place of the Kabbalah to the makom of the zrika, which is the mizbeach. And again, even if you're shechting right by the rings, which you know the rings were right by the mizbeach, at the end of the day, there's still an area that has to be traversed. That's called holacha. So Rav Sheshes' shaila is what is the status? Well, the truth is it snowballed a little bit. The shaila that began was, can you do holacha with the left hand? Right? Holacha bismol. What's the status of holacha with the left hand? So the Gemara says, Rav Sheshes went ahead and halacha l'mais is quoted from our Mishnah that from the fact that the Kohen Gadol transported on Yom Kippur the machta in his right hand and the kaf, the ladle with the ketores in his left hand, shows you that holacha b'smol is kosher. So the Gemara says, Meisvei zar va'onein shikaru balmum b'kabala ba'holacha b'zrika pasel. So Gemara quotes a Mishnah. Or Braisa should say, zar, non-Kohen, onein. They both say onein is a reference to someone in a state of avelus, but specifically in the period of time between death and burial. Shikar, someone who's intoxicated. Balmum, a blemished Kohen. B'kabala u'ba'holacha b'zrika pasel. If any of these individuals did either Kabbalah, holacha, or zrika, they have invalidated the avodah. Similarly, v'chein yoshev. It's interesting. If you do any of the avodos while sitting, v'chein small, or if you do any of the avodos with your left hand, pasel. Ultimately, again, a pasel. So we'll say tiyufta. So here you see this is a pretty clear refutation of Rav Sheshes' position that you see over here that doing the avod, including holacha with the left hand, is invalid as pasel. I bahar Rav Sheshes uda osva. Now we'll say, interestingly enough, the Gemara just brought this as a refutation to Rav Sheshes, but interestingly enough, we're going to see that Rav Sheshes himself quoted this refutation. Where did Rav Sheshes quote it? Amrli Rav Sheshes la Amore de Rav Chisda. Because Rav Sheshes said to the Amore Rav Chisda, Boy minei Rav Chisda, holacha bizar mahu. What's the halacha? For non-Kohen does holacha. So we'll say, so now we're shifting gears a little bit. This was the shaila, right? This was the shaila that ultimately, again, Rav Sheshes asked of the Amora of Rav Chisda, right? They asked of Rav Chisda, if a non-Kohen does holacha, what is the status? So Amar Lei, and he responded, Kshera o mikra misayani. So he said it's kosher. Rav Chisda said it's kosher if a zar does holacha, and not only that, I'll bring you a pasuk as a proof. What's the pasuk? The Gemara quotes from Divrei Hayomim, v'yishchatu es ha-pesach, v'yizirku ha-kohanim miyadam, v'alavim mafshitim. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, the drasha from the pasuk over here is as follows. The way it sounds like from this pasuk is vayishchatu ha-pesach. They shechted the Pesach, and you'll see that they refer to as in just a moment. Vayizirku ha-kohanim miyadam. The Kohanim did zrika when they took it from their hands. V'alavim mafshitim, and the Levim flayed the animals. We'll say the way the Gemara's rare of Chis understanding this pasuk is who's doing the shechita over here in this particular pasuk. This is during times of King Yoshio. This is the Levim are doing the shechita. Fine, not a problem. Why? shchita is ksheira bizarre. That's not a you don't need Levim. Yisrael could do shchita. So the Levim are doing the shchita. Now it's interesting because in the pasuk, the first time that a Kohen is mentioned is when Vayizriku HaKohanim. The Kohanim did the zrika, which sounds like what Chisda is interpreting the pasuk is that what the Levim did the shchita. What else did the Levim do? What else did they do? The holacha, right? They took the blood to the Kohanim, and then the Kohanim went ahead and did the zrika. So we'll say this is a case, ultimately again, remember, a Levi, vis-a-vis the avoda, is a zar. He's right, the zar is any non-Kohen. See over here that, holacha. See over that holacha, done by a zar, ultimately is kasher. This is what Rav Chisda was responding. V'alvim avshidim mosiv Rav Sheshes, and Rav Sheshes raised the kash on this. He said, 1 second. Zar va'onim v'shikr u'ba'amum b'kabbalah u'ba'holacha u'b'zrika pasel v'chei yoshe v'chein small pasel. But here you have Rav Sheshes, Rabosai, the very brisa that the Gemara quoted to refute the position of Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes was quoting to refute Rav Chisda. So remember again, they're asking from Rav Chisda, what's the halacha if a zar does holacha? So again, Rav Chisda quotes the pasuk. Rav Chisda says it's kasher, a zar could do holacha, and I'll bring you a pasuk from Divrayim to support that assertion. Rav Sheshes then quotes the very brisa, bless you, that we just quoted on the top of Mem Tesel and Aleph. He quotes the first brisa, and that brisa says that what? That if a non-Kohen goes ahead and does holacha, it is possible. Not only that, but that's the very same brisa that says that what? That if you do halacha b'small, if you do halacha with your left hand, that is also invalid. To which the Gemara says, so what's going on over here? Basra d'shamei hada osa. Okay, you're right. So we'll say the progression is like this. Rav Sheshes first raised the question, can you do halacha b'small? Well, he said you could do halacha b'small. Then the Gemara disproves him by quoting the brisa. Once Rav Sheshes hears the brisa, he's like, okay, I was disproved. I was wrong. I was wrong. And now he uses that very same brisa to go ahead and refute Rav Chisda. So I'll just tell you something amazing. Such an incredible musar here about, you see, the ability to admit when one is wrong. Isn't it incredible? I quoted this many times. Gemara Masechah Shabbos says, "Lamad lashon chalomar eini yodea." A person has to teach his tongue to say, I was wrong. I don't know. So the Ben Yoyada says, what do you mean you have to teach your tongue to say? Because the Ben Yoyada says it's hard to say, I don't know. So therefore you literally have to teach your tongue to, because again, we like to think that we're all knowing. That comes from the fact that we're at Salam Elokim. And the Ribono Shel Olam is omniscient, is omnipresent, is omnipotent. He's all of these things. So there's a part of us that likes to think that we're all of these things as well, but we're not. So it's difficult to say I don't know. So I've often thought, if it's difficult to say I don't know, right? If it's lamad lashon chalomar ini yodea, then how difficult is it for us to admit that we're wrong? Right? In other words, saying I don't know is much easier than saying, we all know this, it's very difficult in life to admit that I was wrong. I mean, not for you to admit that I was wrong. I mean for each of us to admit that we were wrong. Right? So let's say, to admit, if it's lamad lashon chalomar ini yodea, imagine lamad lashon chalomar ta'isi. I made a mistake in here, but say the godless of these kind of gemaras is here you have Rav Sheshes, and again, Rav Sheshes is in print stating a halacha. Then Rav Sheshes was disproven, right? He was disproved. He was showed that it was wrong. And what does he do? He accepts, he's makabel, and he goes on. What an incredible Muslim life. Sometimes we get so stuck on trying to prove that we're right, even when we're so clearly wrong, and we dig in, right? We dig in even further. Anything but to admit that I was wrong. And we end up wasting so much time and so much energy trying to perpetuate a falsehood just because I don't want to admit that I was wrong. And if Sheshes comes along and says we're all wrong at different times in life, be makabel it, use it to build yourself stronger and move on in life. So I'll say, but here's the problem, right? Rav Chisda wanted to prove that holacha is ksheira bizar based on this pasuk from Divrei Hayamim. I will say it's a pretty good proof. In other words, Rav Chisda is quoting a pasuk, so it's true. Rav Sheshes quotes a brisa, right? And the brisa is pretty explicit that halacha bizar is not good. But Rav Chisda quoted a pasuk. So what do I do with the pasuk? Right? What do we do with the pasuk? It's very interesting. The Gemara says, "V'harav Chisda kra kamar da'avid ma'aseh itztiva." I will say this is very interesting. Literally what it means is that the Leviim in this situation acted like a platform. It's the was a platform, which also means that what? You see, when Rav Chisda read the pasuk, he thought the pasuk read like this: Vayishchetu HaPesach, the Leviim shechted the Korban Pesach, and then the unwritten part is, the next written part is Vayizrika HaKohanim, the Kohanim did this Rika. So the Rav Chisda understood it was that the Leviim therefore did the holacha, they brought the blood to the Kohanim for this Rika, to which the Gemara says, no, what happened is, the Kohanim the Leviim did the Shechita, the Kohanim did the Kabbalah. The Kohanim then gave the blood to the Leviim. But what did the Leviim do with the blood? They stood still. Ma'aseh Itztava means like they stood, literally Itztava was a platform. It's like they were a platform. The Leviim were the platform. They just stood still until when? Until when? Until some other Kohen was able to come take the blood, do the holacha, and subsequently do the zrika. So in other words, the process was Shechita by Leviim, Kabbalah by Kohanim. Then the Kohanim would give the blood to the Levi. The Levi would just stand in place. The Levi was a placeholder. Just hold this. Don't move. Don't go anywhere. Just hold it, like Milton was just motioning. Maybe also to stir it so that it doesn't congeal. And then another Kohen came along and did the actual holacha. Beautiful. So we'll say, bye, Rav Papa. So Rav Papa comes along and says as follows. So I was saying, by the way, that's how we paskin, right? We paskin not like Rav Sheshes. We paskin like this brisa, that halacha lamaisa, a zar, a nanka, an onein, a shikr, balmum, are not allowed to do kabbalah, holacha, and zrika. Similarly, again, with your left hand. You're not allowed to do holacha with your left hand as well. What about Yom Kippur? And what's the answer to that? Lo efshar, right? There's no, again, there's no alternative. There, the avoda of the day demands that you act in a way that you would not normally act in the rest of the year. But under normal circumstances, we don't do holacha b'smol. Beautiful. So it says the Gemara. By Rapa, we'll say a fascinating case. Chafan chaveira v'nosin l'sof chafnav mahu. So we'll say, so remember again, yesterday's daf, already 2 days ago, we started with the sugya of chafina. Right? So remember again, let's go through our process once more. So remember again, the Kohen Gadol, shovel full of ketoros is coming from where? Beis Avatinas. Right? They're bringing it from the Beis Avatinas chamber. The Kohen's going to go ahead. They bring out the shovel. Right? Remember again, there are two shovels. Right? Shovel number one was used for coals, right? That's when the Kohen went up to the Mizbeach. Shovel number two was used to bring a shovel full of ketoros out of the Beis Avatinas. After they bring the shovel full, the Kohen Gadol would go ahead and take a chafina. So Moshe was telling me that Rav Kalman Akiva gave you physical demonstrations yesterday. So remember again, he's going in, he's taking his hands, he's cupping them like this, and he's bringing the ketoros out. That's his chafina. What is he then doing with that? Placing it into the kaf. Right, he's placing that into the ladle. Right, that's the next step over here. Interestingly enough, and then of course he's bringing it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and we're going to discuss what he does with it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So Rav Papa raises the following shaila: Chafan chafeiro v'nasan l'sochaf navmar. We'll say, what happens in the following situation? Imagine the following scenario. Let's say Kohen 1 does the chafina. So right, they bring out the shovel full of ketoros from the Beis Avatinas. He does the chafina. And then he pours his chafina into the hands of the Kohen Gadol. So what's the status of that? Does that work? Chafan chaveiro v'nasan l'sochaf nav. So again, if one Kohen took the chafina, he did the original handful from the shovel, he then goes ahead and pours it into the Kohen Gadol's hands. Does that work? Mahu. On one hand, we can say, listen, all we need is a handful from the Kohen Gadol. Do we have a handful from the Kohen Gadol? Absolutely. Odilm, so on one hand that should work. Odilm, v'lakach vehevi ba'inan v'haleko. Or maybe on the flip side, we need v'lakach vehevi. That we need the Kohen Gadol to not just hold a handful of ketoros, but what do we need him to do? V'lakach. We'll say v'lakach means what? He must be the one who actively takes that handful from the shovel. So we'll say here the shaila. So do we say what we ultimately need is a handful of ketoros from the Kohen Gadol? Do we have that in this case? Yes. So one, this should be good. On the other hand, no, maybe we need v'lakach v'hevi. Maybe what we really need, ultimately, again, is that the Kohen Gadol be the one who actively takes the handful from the shovel, and of course that's missing over here. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Teku. So the Gemara leaves it. Now we'll say, we're going to see, anytime the Gemara kind of leaves these cases as a teku, the way the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Avodos Yom Kippurim is that halacha l'maisi shouldn't do it. you shouldn't do it. But if you did do it, like the lashon over here is, I'll just say the lashon, right? The Rambam says, where was this? I'm sorry. Perek He Halacha Chaf Ches. So the Rambam says, you shouldn't do it in all of these cases. I'll leave it because there's going to be a few more cases, but I'll just tell you. He says, Kalelu Safek. So remember when it says Teiko, it's a Safek if the avoda works. V'lo Yaktir, therefore you shouldn't offer it up. V'im Hiktir Hurtza. But if you did offer it up, it works. So we'll say, for example, in this case, and again, we'll see a few more cases like this, but in this case over here, where the Kohen Gadol is not the one who's taking the original chafina from the shovel, but one Kohen is taking it, placing it into the hands of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol is then placing it into the kaf, into the ladle. Ideally, we don't like this, and therefore we don't do it. But if you did it and you offer it up, it works. Okay, by Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. We'll say another example. Chafanu meis, interesting case. What happens if the Kohen Gadol does the chafina? So we'll say, remember again, just to understand the case over here. He's doing the chafina, right? He's going ahead and conducting himself in the right way. So he's taking the handful from the shovel. And then what happens? He then places it in the ladle, in the kaf, and then he dies. Ma'u sheikanis achar b'chafinaso. So we'll say, so Baruch Emes, but there's another Kohen Gadol, right? Because again, the avoda has to go on. So now we'll say, so what happens? Now the new Kohen comes along. Can the new Kohen go ahead and use the chafina of the previous Kohen? Right? That's the shaila. Chafanu meis, ma'u sheikanis achar b'chafinaso. So Rabbi Chanina, bo'urei, sheila sarishon. We'll say, this is very interesting. So Rabbi Chanina says, such a good kasha. That was a kasha that was asked even in earlier generations. So I'll say, just the names here are going to be important. So remember, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is the one who's asking the shaila. Okay, if the Kohen Gadol did the chafina, then he died. Can the new Kohen Gadol use the chafina of the previous one? That's the shaila. Rabbi Chanina hears the kasha and he says, what a great kasha. Sheilas harishonim. That is a shaila of earlier generations. Now, interesting enough, the Gemara says, L'meimra, to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi kashish. They will say the way that sounds like over here is Rabbi Chanina is extolling the shailas of previous generations, which sounds like Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is older than Rabbi Chanina, right? The member of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi kashish is that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is older than Rabbi Chanina. That Rabbi Chanina is referring to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's kasha as a shaila of previous generations. Vam Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. We'll say 1 second, but that doesn't seem to be the case because after all, the Gemara says like this: Am Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi hitir Rabbi Chanina lishtos shchalayim b'Shabbos. Yet I will say, watch this. We have Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi saying that Rabbi Chanina permitted me to drink shechalayim. We'll say shechalayim is cress juice that's extracted from cress. Right? So the Gemara apparently used to drink this for medicinal purposes. So Rabbi Shimon Levi is saying that Rabbi Chanina allowed me to drink. So we'll say, so first of all, already over here you see the fact that Rabbi Shimon Levi is asking the shaila to Rabbi Chanina indicates to us who's older. Bepashtos, who's older? Rabbi Chanina. Yet they see where the kasha is going. Remember again, Rabbi Chanina hears the shaila of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and he extols it as the great kasha of previous generations, which seems to indicate that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is older than Rabbi Chanina. Yet here we're seeing that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is asking his shailas to Rabbi Chanina, which would seem to indicate that Rabbi Chanina was older than Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So the Gemara is just going to digress for a moment to discuss the Messias of the shaila. So lishtos pshita. Of course you could drink cress juice on Shabbos. After all, this nan, kala ochlim adam ochel refuah, v'chala mashkin shosa. We'll say in general, the way it works, remember again, one is not permitted to engage in medicinal healing and refuah on Shabbos. And the reason for that is gzeira of schika samemonim. There's a concern that you may come to go ahead and grind up herbs. That's the concern. So therefore I will say, but interestingly enough, when doesn't that concern apply? It doesn't apply ultimately in a situation where you are consuming the food or the drink in a what called normative derech achila. So therefore the Gemara says, of course you could drink cress juice on Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, Ella lishchok v'lishtosh chalayim b'Shabbos. Rather, what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was asking Rabbi Chanina is, can I go ahead and grind up the cress on Shabbos in order to extract the liquids and drink that on Shabbos? Because remember again, grinding, tchina, could be one of the Lamates Malachas, to which the Gemara says, Hey Chidami, what's the case? If we're talking about a situation of sakana, of danger to one's health, and therefore again the shaila is, can I grind up the grass in order to take it for medicinal purposes? If there is sakana, mishra shari, that is surely permitted. V'idaleka sakanta, and if there is no sakana, meisar asir, then of course what? Of course it is going to be asir. So what's the metzias? The olam deika sakanta. In reality, there was sakana. The case in question also was that there was sakana. So why is there a shaila if you could prepare the cress drink? V'hachi kami boile. And what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was asking Rabbi Chanina was the following shaila. Mi masya de nechal alayu shapsa o lo masya. V'lo nechal alayu shapsa. So this is very interesting. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was asking Rabbi Chanina a shaila in cress juice. He wasn't asking him as much as Shaila in Hilchos Shabbos. I mean, Rabbi Chanina understood that ultimately, again, one could be Mechal Shabbos for sakana. The Shaila was, does cress juice heal? Does it heal? In other words, if I'm going to be Mechal Shabbos for something, I have to be Mechal Shabbos for something that has a chance at working. But if something doesn't really have a chance of working, I'm not going to be Mechal Shabbos for it. So Rabbi Yeshua was asking Rabbi Chanina, you're a mumcha, you're an expert in refuos. Tell me, does cress juice work for my particular malady that I should go ahead and grind it up on Shabbos in order to make a cress juice drink? To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Chanina, tell me, why was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asking this particular shayla Rabbi Chanina? Mishum debaki b'refuos. Because Rabbi Chanina was known as an expert in medicine. He was a doctor, I don't know if he was a doctor, he was an expert in medicine. Dam Rabbi Chanina, let's listen to this. So Gemara gives an example of Rabbi Chanina's expertise. He says, Dam Rabbi Chanina, me'olam lo sha'alani adam amakas pir de lavana v'chaya. So Rabbi Chanina said, literally, no one ever asked me a shayla regarding being bitten by a white mule who lived. Which I will say is another way of saying, there's never been a person who was bitten by a white mule who lived. So in other words, the Gemara is just giving this an example of Rabbi Chanina's acute medical knowledge. The Gemara says, 1 second. Well, people do live, right? People get bitten by white mules all the time. And they're fine. So what's going on over here? Amos v'chayos. No, what Rabbi Chanina meant to say is, whenever a person is bitten by a white mule, ultimately, again, they're never fully healed. In other words, I guess that type of bite you could live, but it never fully heals. The Gemara says, 1 second, actually, people do get healed, right? They're actually fine after getting bitten by a white mule. To which the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Chanina was referring to a very specific situation. We're talking about, again, red mules with white-tipped feet. So apparently, again, this type of mule, all right, so a very specific situation. So the Gemara is referring over here to Rabbi Chanina's very specific type of knowledge. Right? So he had a very specific type of knowledge, so this is just demonstrative of that. So therefore, both say. So again, what's the point of all of this? Right? The point of all of this was as follows. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked the shaila, right? What was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's shaila? His shaila was, if Kohen Gadol did chafina, right, and then died, could the replacement Kohen Gadol now use the same chafina? Rabbi Chanina hears this shaila and he says, wow, look at the shailas of earlier generations, which would seem to indicate to us, based on that statement, that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was older than Rabbi Chanina. Now the Gemara says, here's the only problem with that. We see Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asking his shailas to Rabbi Chanina and extolling Rabbi Chanina as the medical expert, which would seem to put Rabbi Chanina and is older than Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, Mikol Makom Shmamina, Rabbi Chanina Kashish. What comes out from this whole exchange, I will say, remember again, our sugya right now is not about medicine. So what comes out from this whole exchange over here is that Rabbi Chanina is in fact older than Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So what's going on? This is what it means to say, She'ilasan Kishe'ila Shalishon. So we'll say, what Rabbi Chanina meant was as follows, that when Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked this shaila, Rabbi Chanina was saying, oh, by the way, this is not a new shaila. We've asked this shaila in previous generations as well. So in fact, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was younger than Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina was older. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asked the Shaila about using the chafina of a deceased Kohen Gadol, and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, "Oh, you know what? We've asked that Shaila before. It's a good kasha. That Shaila has been asked in the Beis Medrash in earlier generations as well." Rabbi Chanina haki, but I will say, did Rabbi Chanina really have this kasha? Right? Did Rabbi Chanina really entertain the possibility that you could use, that the new Kohen Gadol could use the chafina of the old Kohen Gadol? Rabbi Chanina said, "Bepar v'lo bedamo shapar." I will say this is going to be our sugyan amid beis, but let's get a little bit of an introduction to it now because it's quite fascinating. Rabbi Chanina held the halacha is bepar v'lo bedamo shapar. I will say, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi, a very important Rashi here, almost right across in Rashi. Bepar v'lo bedamo shapar bezos yava aron al hakodesh bepar. So I will say, the pasuk in Achremos that goes through the details of the avodah of Yom Kippur says as follows: Bezos yava Aaron al Kodesh. With this, Aaron will come into the Kodesh Hakadoshim. What is he coming in with? Bepar ben bakar lechatos. He's coming in with a par ben bakar for a chatos. The ayol the ola. So listen to this, Rabbi. So Rashi says over here, Bezos yava Aaron al Kodesh bepar v'lo bedamo shapar. But not with the blood of the parable. So what does that mean? She'im shachat paro umeis eina mishamish taktav niknas ba'oslo dam lifnim elatzarach lahavi par acher v'lishchot. So we'll say, listen to this. Rabbi Chanina is going to hold, and we're going to see, like I said, this sugya in its entirety later on. We'll say, but the idea is as follows. What happens if the Kohen Gadol shechts the par, and before being able to offer up the dam inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kohen Gadol dies? So now you have a replacement Kohen Gadol. The replacement Kohen Gadol cannot use the dam of the previous Kohen Gadol's par, but rather what does he have to do? He has to shech the new par. That's what it means when it says bezos yavo Aaron al hakodesh bepar. Bepar means the Kohen Gadol must come in with the par that he shechted, but he cannot come in with the dam of the par shechted by the previous Kohen Gadol. Again, we're going to see that on Amud Beis. Now, finish up that Rashi. The reason why this is important, the Gemara says, "V'cheivan detzarich lahavi par acher tzarich lachbon acher shchitaso." Rabbi said, we're going to see that the chafina. Well, let's see in the Gemara. Well, Rabbi Chanina said as follows. That in general, Rabbi said the halacha is that the Kohen Gadol must go in with the very blood of the par that he shechted. But again, if Kohen Gadol shechted the par and there's the dam, and then Kohen Gadol 1 dies, first Kohen Gadol dies, replacement Kohen Gadol comes along before the dam of the par was offered up in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Kohen Gadol number 2 has to do a brand new par. Now watch this. Rabbi Chanina, Kitore shechafna kodem shchitas hapar va'asa v'lo klum. And Rabbi Chanina says that when is chafina done? Chafina is only done after the shchita of the par. Right? Even if it was done, if chafina was done before the shchita of the par, it's a meaningless chafina. So I will say, now watch this. According to this approach, if you allow ultimately again, chafina after chafina, right? If you allow ultimately one Kohen Gadol to go ahead, or one Kohen to pour the chafina into the hands of another Kohen, you end up running into an issue. What's the issue? Take a look at the next Rashi. Shekein seder ha'avodos. Be'inon, bar ba'inyon, chafan umeis, nami i'afsha shaloshacha parotchila. V'zeh ba'acharav tzarech lahavi par achar, v'amri tikanis b'chafinoso sharishon, nimtzeis chafino zu kodem shchitas parosho sheni. So the Rabbi say, Rabbi Chanina says like this: if you will allow one Kohen to go ahead and take a handful of Ketores and pour it into another Kohen's hand, then ultimately you could have a Metzias where what? Where the Chafina is done before the Shchit of the Par. In what situation? In this very unique situation where Kohen Gadol 1 dies, after the Shchita, but before the Zika of the Damapar, Kohen Gadol number 2 then has to go ahead and do a new par. But if you allow the transfer of the Ketores from one handful to another handful, it could turn out that halacha l'maisa, the Chafina is being done before the Shchita of the par. So I'll say it's just a technicality to show that Rabbi Chanina cannot subscribe to the idea that you could transfer the contents of the Ketores, or you could transfer the Ketores from one hand to another hand. To which the Gemara says, this is what it means to say. The fact that the kasha was raised, michlal the kasavar bepar, va'afilo b'damo shalpar. So what the Gemara is just suggesting is the ability to entertain that you could transfer the contents of the Ketores from one handful to another handful, in other words, from the hands of one coin to another coin, would indicate to us that you must also entertain the possibility that the dam of the par from the now deceased Kohen Gadol could be used by the replacement Kohen Gadol as well. Ulamai desvira le sheilasu kishelas harishonim, and according to the approach that said this was a shaila of the Rishonim, my havi Allah. What is the bottom line halacha? Right at the end of the day, we had a shaila. We'll say, right, what was the shaila? Chafan chaveiro v'nasan laso chaveiro mahu. Right, I'm sorry. Chafan umeis mahu. I'm sorry. So we'll say the shaila of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was that if the Kohen Gadol did chafina and now he died, what's the shaila? Can we use his handful? Can we use that chafina or not? So we'll say, so it turns out the Gemara says that it would appear based on the conversation of par that that's not really going to be a possibility. But according to the shah that the Gemara asked, Lamaisa, is it possible or not? My havi Allah. Amra papa, I chofein v'chozer v'chofein chaver nichnas b'chafinaso dahamakayma chafina. Both say, listen to this. Everything is going to depend on another machlokes. So we'll say, I just want to point out, this particular shaila is going to be dependent on a number of other shailas, right? Shaila number one is what? That Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's shaila is that Allah Lamaisa Kohen Gadol does the chafina. He does the chafina. Now he died. So what's the question? Can you go ahead and use that handful can the new Kohen Gadol use that handful? That's shaila number one. So we'll say, so now what we're going to see is that shaila is really going to be dependent on a couple of other shailas. Number one, what is it getting dependent on? Dam. If the Kohen Gadol shechted the par and then died, can you use the dam of that par for the avodah inside the Kodesh, or the Kodesh HaKodashim? That's shaila number one. And what is that going to depend on? We're going to see this machlokes some of the days, but that's going to be bezos yava arna la Kodesh bepar. Does par mean par, that Imamish has to do a brand new par, or does that mean what? Damol shal par. That as long as the dam of the original Kohen Gadol's par is intact, you could use that even though the new Kohen Gadol did not go ahead and shech it. So Rabbi say, that's going to have an implication on this as well. Why? Because Lamaisa, if he has to do a new par, then by definition he automatically has to do a new chafina as well. Why? Again, we'll see this on the days. Why? Because we'll say chafina is done when? Chafina is done after the par. So the moment you'll require a new par is the moment that by definition you'll require a new chafina. That's issue number one. I will say now there's issue number two. Issue number two is I chofein v'chozer v'chofein. So I will say this is very interesting. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, I chofein chozer v'chofein. It's the last short line. Rashi says, Imifshit talon bayon di iboilan gabe chafinas pnim im tzarech lachzor v'lachpon olo. So we'll say, listen to this, and this is going to be quite fascinating as well. The Kohen Gadol is walking into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, right? Remember, let's go through our process for just a moment, right? Remember, how do we get to Ketores? Shovel comes out of where? Shovelful comes out of where? Beis Avatinas. Kohen Gadol does the chafina, takes the handful. What does he do with the handful? Put it into the kaf. What does he do with the kaf? What does he do with the kaf? Takes it in which hand? Left hand. He's walking left hand kaf, right, I'm a lefty. Right, left hand kaf, right hand shovel. He walks into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, right? He's holding both of these items. When he gets into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, we're going to see there's a machlokes. We know what ultimately has to occur. What has to occur? Ketores gets on the coals. The shaila I will say is, does the Kohen Gadol take the contents of the ladle, put it back into his hands, and then put that onto the machta, onto the shovel with the coals? Or does he... Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Excellent. Okay? Have a good day, everyone. Have a good day. Have fun. Right? Or Greg just solved 2,000 years of machlokes. So does he go ahead as, we're going to see it's machlokes, does he go ahead and transfer it from the ladle into his hands, and then take the ketores from his hands and put it onto the machta, put it onto the coals? Or does he transfer right from the ladle onto the coals? That's the machlokes. So we'll say that the Gemara calls over here of chofein v'chozer v'chofein. So we'll say, now watch this. It says the Gemara, Amra Papa, I chofein v'chozer v'chofein chaver nichnas b'chafinaso dahamak haima chafina. I ein chofein v'chozer v'chofein tibaylecha. So let's listen to this. So the Gemara makes a very interesting distinction over here. The Gemara says, if you hold that in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kohen Gadol takes the Ketoras from the ladle and puts it back into his hands, and then he knows there's another chafina, then he goes ahead and what? Puts it onto the coals. Then the Gemara suggests there's no problem with using the chafina of the previous, now deceased Kohen Gadol. Why not? Because I will say, interestingly enough, the new Kohen Gadol will end up doing a chafina as well. See, I will say, hear what the Gemara is saying? Remember, we have a simple shaila. Our simple shaila was, Kohen Gadol Aleph died. He died after doing the chafina. So what's the shaila? Can Kohen Gadol Beis, can Kohen Gadol number 2, use the chafina of the now deceased Kohen Gadol? So the Gemara says, well, it's dependent on the par, not the par. The Gemara says, there's also another issue over here. Here's what we know. Kohen Gadol, right, new Kohen Gadol Beis, has to do a chafina. So the Gemara says, if you hold it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kohen Gadol empties the contents of the kaf into his hands, and then places it onto the coals. We're okay letting him use the chafina of the now deceased Kohen Gadol. Why? Because at the end of the day now, the new Kohen Gadol will also end up doing a chafina. But if you hold that the way it works in the Kodesh HaKadoshim is that it goes right from the ladle, right, the kaf, onto the machta, onto the pan, onto the shovel, onto the coals, then that effectively means that what Rabbi say? That Kohen Gadol number 2 will never end up what? Doing a chafina. Well, that's not possible. Therefore, again, it would have to be under those circumstances, we would not allow him to use the chafina of the now deceased Kohen Gadol. So the Gemara says, Amar le Rav Huna b'reid Rav Yoshua, the Rav Papa, Adrabah. I can say just the opposite. If you hold that the Kohen Gadol does another chafina inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in other words, he empties the contents of the kaf into his hands, lo yikanis achar b'chafinaso, then we shouldn't let him use the chafina of the now deceased Kohen Gadol. We'll say, why not? This is incredible. Because it will say, here's the problem with using another Kohen Gadol's chafina, which is no two hands are the same size. So I will say, if you're gonna tell me that in the Kodesh HaKadoshim there's gonna be now another chafina, it's impossible that what? That either Kohen Gadol number 2 is either not going to be deficient, in other words, that when you empty the contents of the kaf into his hands, I will say, the ketoris in the kaf was measured by whose hands? By whose hands? Kohen Gadol number 1, who's now deceased. So if you're going to empty that now into the hands of Kohen Gadol number 2, one of two things is going to happen. Either it's going to be deficient, or he's not going to be able to contain everything. But either way, it's not going to work. So the Gemara says just the opposite. If you hold that halacha l'maisa in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you just empty the contents of the ladle, of the kaf, right onto the machta, we're good to go. But if you're going to tell me you're going to have to start emptying the contents of the kaf into the hands of the second Kohen Gadol, you can't do that, because it's going to be, we know by definition it's going to be imperfect. To which the Gemara says, but if you hold that there's no second chafina, but you go out and you empty the contents of the kaf right onto the machta, then maybe it should be okay. To which the Gemara says, because we'll say this is a shaila. This is a shaila in the Gemara. We'll say we've actually seen this already. Chofein v'chozer chofein olo. We'll say what happens in the Kodesh HaKadosh. We're going to study this sugya, but what happens in the Kodesh HaKadosh? We'll say it's machlokes. Does the Kohen Gadol simply empty the contents of the kaf onto the machta, or does he do another chafina, emptying the contents of the ladle of the kaf into his hands, and then placing from his hands onto the shovel? To which the Gemara says, Tashma, kach haisamidasa. I will say, the Mishnah said it before, this was the measurement of the ketores. But say it was a handful. My love, kishim shemidasa mibachotz, kach midasa mibifnim. So I will say, does that not seem to indicate to us that the same way the Kohen Gadol does chafina outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, when he comes to do the actual ketores avoda, he must empty the contents of the kaf back into his hands. There's another chafina. To which Gemara says, "Lo dilma she'im ratza lasos mida osa." No, maybe it means like this. Maybe it means that if they wanted to make a kli that was the size of a handful, they could do so, even though we rejected that notion already. Inami, shelo yachsar v'lo yosir. Or the other possibility Rabbi say is that you must take an exact handful, no more and no less. So Rabbi say now the Gemara is kind of sidetracked by this chofin v'chozer v'chofin. So Tashma, Rabbi say the Gemara says I'm going to prove to you what happened in the Kodesh Kodesh. Rabbi say this is incredible. Keitzadu oseh. What would the Kohen do? So Rabbi say we're actually going to study this in greater depth as well, but this is really quite fascinating. Keitzadu oseh. So Rabbi says, remember again, this is now describing the process inside of the Holy of Holies, inside the Kodesh HaKadosh. So remember again, no one's arguing what happened outside of the Kodesh HaKadosh, right? We all know. Shovel of Ketoris comes out of Beis Abatinas, Kohen Gadol takes the handful, empties that into the kaf, into the ladle. He walks into the Kodesh HaKadoshim with the machta, the shovel, the fire pan with the coals in his right hand. He walks with the kaf in his left hand. That's how he's walking in. What happens when he gets in? Here we go. Oches as habazach berosh etzba'osav. He goes ahead and he holds the handle of the kaf with the tip of his fingers. V'ish omrim b'shinav. Others say with his teeth. Again, we'll get into this. Umale begodlo ad shemagia lebein atzile yadav. And I will say, what does he do? He manipulates with his fingers until it gets to his hands. V'chozer umachzira l'sochav nafsh. So I will say, essentially what we're going to see, and again we'll see this in greater depth, what the Kohen Gadol essentially does is like this. When he walks into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he walks in holding both of these items in his hand, right? Remember again, the machta, the shovel, which was held in his right hand, has a long handle, right? Remember again, part of the reason for that long handle was why? So he could keep it under his body, under his arm, so literally he could anchor it according to his body. This way again, they would give him greater stability in holding on to it. Right, so we'll say what would happen afterwards. So he would go and hold it against his body. Now the Ketoris, of course, is much lighter, right? So you don't need a handle that extends all the way up until your body. It was much lighter. So we'll say, so what would happen when he would get into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Essentially, what the Gemara says is like this. We'll see what he did with the fire pan, but he's effectively putting it down. He's putting it down really between the badim. Actually, we'll see on the floor or between the staves. Or there we'll get to that. But he's putting down the fire pan. What he then does with the kaf with the ladle, with the receptacle the Ketoris is in, is he manipulates it till he's holding it in his hand. And essentially, I will say what he does is he slowly pours the contents of the Ketoris, of the kaf, into his hands. So he slowly manipulates, because remember, you can't drop any of the Ketoris. He slowly goes ahead and tilts the kaf until it empties into his hands, and ultimately goes ahead and holds it like this. So we'll say, so again, we'll see the actual mechanics of it, but essentially what he's doing over here is, whereas he starts out holding the kaf by the handle like this, he slowly moves the kaf back to his hands, and then gently moves it into his cupped hands to retrieve the Ketoris like this. And I will say, v'chozer u'machzir l'sochav nav v'tzobra. And I will say, now what does he do? Then he piles it on the coals, kedei she'eh ashna shohe lavo. In order that what? In order that halacha l'maisa, the smoke would delay coming out. So, said the idea over here is he piles the Ketoris on the coals so that it'll take a little bit of time for the Ketoris to burn. So, others say he sprinkles it or he spreads it out on the coals in order that the smoke should come quickly. Zohi avoda kash sheba mikdash, and this is the hardest avoda in the mikdash. So the Gemara says, Zohi v'sulo, this is the hardest avoda. Va'ika malika. Oh, what about malika? I'll say which was much harder. Va'ika kamitza, or kamitza, which was hard as well. I'll say, remember again, we learned this before. Kamitza was hard with what type of mincha? What type of mincha? The mincha machvas or the minchas marcheshes, right? Kamitza was not so hard with a fine flour mincha. Kamitza was much harder with the types of menachos that were first baked or fried, then broken up into pieces. You took your 3 fingerfuls, and then what would happen? By definition, the kamitza, the pieces would extend outwards, and you had to shave off. You had to shave off the edges of the pieces. So the Gemara is like kamitza. Ella zohi avoda kasha me avodos kasha sheba mikdash. So I said the idea the Gemara is saying is you're right. It doesn't mean to say this is the hardest avoda. What it means to say is this was amongst the more difficult avodos in the mikdash. But I will say, what comes out from here? What's the conclusion of the Gemara? Shmamina chofein v'chozer v'chofein shmamina. They both say what does come out from here, at least if we could resolve one thing, is that the Gemara seems to indicate, like Greg said, that halacha l'maisa, what? We do in fact, the Kohen Gadol does in fact empty the contents of the ladle of the kaf back into his hands inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So chafina is effectively done twice. It's done the first time in the Kodesh, outside of the Mikdash building, where ultimately he's taking the handful from the shovel full of Ketores brought out from the base Avatinas, puts it into the kaf, and then inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he is very gently tilting that kaf back into his hands, retrieving the handful of Ketores and placing that on the machta, placing that on the fire pan with the coals. How he's placing it on the coals, we see, is subject to machlokes. Is he piling it on the coals? Is he kind of scattering it over the coals? That's a machlokes. But I will say, but halacha l'maisa, at least we know he is pouring it back into his hands. So I will say, what I do want to point out is the original shaila of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is still here. So I'll say, so this original shaila, chafan umeis, if the Kohen Gadol does chafina and then he dies, can the second Kohen Gadol go ahead and use that handful? So I'll say, so the Rambam passes, the Gemara doesn't resolve it. So like the previous case as well, the Rambam passes that halacha l'maisa, you should not use that chafina. So if the Kohen Gadol died, he did chafina and then he died before being able to offer that ketores, Kohen Gadol number 2 should do his own chafina, should do a second chafina. What happens if he didn't? He made a mistake. They didn't do a second chafina, and Kohen Gadol number 2 ends up using the chafina of Kohen Gadol number 1. What's the halacha? The Rambam says, nirtza. It works. It works. You don't have to do the avodah over again, so you shouldn't use it, but if you used it ex post facto, after the fact, ultimately again it works. Ibaylu. What's another interesting case? Shachat umeis. So we'll say now this reference is back to what we just had before. What happens if the Kohen Gadol shechted this par? He shechted the par, and then he died. So we'll say, so now you have the dam of the par of the now deceased Kohen Gadol. So can we use that dam, or does Kohen Gadol number 2 have to go ahead and shecht another par? So the Gemara says, Ibaylu shachat umeis ma'u sheikanis achar b'demo mi amrinon bepar va'afilo b'demo shalpar o dilma bepar v'lo b'demo shalpar. So we'll say, this is really a shaila in a pasuk. The Torah says, Bizos yavo Aaron al kodesh bepar. Aaron must come, that Kohen Gadol must come into the Kodesh with his par. So we'll say, what does that mean with his par? Doesn't mean that the same Kohen Gadol comes in with the dam of the par also must be the one who shechted the par? Or do we say no, the Kohen Gadol just needs to come in with the dam of the par, even if what? He did not shecht the par. So we'll say the real shaila is like this. Does the definition of par devolve upon the blood or not? So and the nafkamina would be in this kind of case. Kohen Gadol 1 shechted the par, he has the dam of the par, he died. Kohen Gadol now number 2 comes on the scene. The dam of that par is still there. Can Kohen Gadol number 2 use the dam of the par or not? Or must he shecht another par? To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Chanina Amar bepar v'lo b'dam shel par. Rabbi Chanina will say, halacha l'maisa, no, par means the actual par itself, and it's not just good enough to use the dam of the par. Rabbi Chanina would say, when Kohen Gadol number 2 comes along, Kohen Gadol number 2 must shecht a brand new par. He cannot go ahead and use the dam of the previous par. So the Gemara says, Rish Lakish Amar bepar v'afilu b'dam shel par. Rish Lakish says, no, halacha l'maisa, as long as the blood of the par is there and is usable, Kohen Gadol number 2 need not go ahead and shecht a brand new par. Why? Because when it says Bizos Yava Aaron ala Kodesh bepar even means the dam of the par. So as long as the dam is there, even though Kohen number 2 did not shecht this par, halacha l'maisa, we're good to go. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Ami Amar bepar v'lo b'dam shel par. The Gemara is just talking about this is a machlokes amongst the Amoraim as well. So Rabbi Ami says it means the par v'lo b'dam shel par. You need the actual living par. The Kohen Gadol who enters in with the dam of the par must be the one who shechted the par. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar bepar v'afilu b'dam shel par. Rabbi Yitzchak says no, even if you didn't shecht it, as long as you have the dam, it's good enough. So we'll say essentially as long as the dam is there, the par is usable. Esvei Rabbi Ami Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So Rabbi Amri is the Kash Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Both says very interesting. Nimnin umoshchin yedem meno at sheyishcha. So both say this is Karban Pesach. Remember again, for Karban Pesach, you have to be part of a chabura. So you have the ability to join the chabura or to withdraw from the chabura up until when? Up until Shchita. Up until Shchita. So the Gemara says, but one second. If it was true that dam has the same identity as what? As the actual animal, as the actual carbon. If that's the case, you really should be able to join and to leave a chabura until when? Until Zrika. Until Zrika. V'm'isa. If it was true that ultimately, again, the carbon retains its identity even when it's in the dam form, you should be able to v'm'isa ad shizrak mibayle. You should be able to join and to withdraw from a chabura until Zrika. Shiny hasam dichsiv miyos miseh. Michiyuse diseh. But let's say it's different because by carbon pesach it says mihios miseh. Then when can you ultimately join or withdraw from a chabura? When the set is a set. And I both say everyone agrees the set is only a set until when? Till Shchita. Till Shchita. So the Gemara says, Masiv Marzutra. But what about the following kasha? Ein podin lo be'ego v'lo be'chay v'lo b'shchut. Rabbi said, this is talking about Avir Petach Chamor. Firstborn donkey. Firstborn donkey ultimately again can be redeemed. But the Gemara says it's only you cannot redeem it with an egel, with a calf, v'lo b'chaya, with a chaya, v'lo b'shchuta, and not ultimately with the shechted animal, v'lo b'treifa, not with the treifa animal, v'lo b'kilayim, not with kilayim, v'lo b'koi, you can't redeem it with a koi, but say koi is also a hybrid animal, ela b'seh. The only thing you could go ahead and redeem a peter chamor with is with a seh. Shabbos says, here's what's interesting. Why can't you, the shaila is on a shchuta. If you hold that halacha l'maisa par means afilu b'damo shapar, which means that the par retains its identity even in the blood form, so why should you not be able to redeem a peter chamor with a shchuta? Because even a shechted animal retains its identity as an animal. To which the Gemara says, no, shiny hasam peter chamor is different. Why? The yalif se mi pesach. We make, Rabbi says very interesting, we make a gzera shav of se between Petach Chamor and Karban Pesach. Just like Karban Pesach, you could only use, it only has its identity as a Karban Pesach when it's living. So too by Petach Chamor, the se you have to use has to be a living se. If that's the case, then also by Petach Chamor we should say, Ime ala halon zachar tamu ben shana. By Karban Pesach it also has to be a male animal, an unblemished animal, and within a year. Afkan zachar tamu ben shana. So too by Petach Chamor we should say you can only use a se that is male, unblemished, and within a year. And in fact, that's not the case. Talmud Lomar tifte riba. Also by Petach Chamor tifte comes along and says what? Comes along and says that halacha l'maisa you could even use other animals. Eat tifte riba afilu kulunami. If that's the case, then ultimately, if tifte comes to be marba and tell you that halacha l'maisa you can go ahead and what? You could use all these other animals for pidyon Petach Chamor. Why not go ahead and include all of these other excluded items as well? Imkain se mayahanile. If that's the case, then what does the Torah's mention of se really help us with? So Rabbi say, we'll stop over here for today, but just understand what we are. We're focusing on a very fundamental shaila. So we'll say, we remember again, we're working through all the cases, essentially, where the Kohen Gadol died mid-avoda. Right? So we already established if the Kohen Gadol did chafina, right? Kohen Gadol did chafina and then he died. Can another Kohen Gadol, could the replacing Kohen Gadol use his chafina? What's the answer? Ideally not. But, right, I should say differently. The answer is no. Right? Because at the end of and we'll say now the answer makes sense. Why is the answer no? Because since there's going to be a second chafina in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, we really don't want the second chafina in the Kodesh HaKadoshim being done with someone else's chafina. Why? Because by definition, what is that going to be? Imperfect. It's either going to be too much or too little. One thing is sure, it's not going to be exact. So ideally, we do not use the chafina of the previous Kohen Gadol. The Rambam Paskins, ex post facto, if you used it, nirtza, it works. So it's like kind of working ourselves along. The next shaila of the Gemara was, the Bailahu was, halacha l'maisa, if the Kohen Gadol shechts the par, and now he dies. So what do I have? I have the dam of the previous Kohen Gadol's par. Can I use that dam for the blood service? So Rabbi says, so again, that's going to be a machlokas. What's the machlokas? Here's what we know. Bizos yava arna la kodesh bepar. The Kohen Gadol must go into the kodesh with his par. What's the shaila? Does his par mean the shrit, right, a par that he shechts, or does his par mean the dam of the par? is the dam the same thing as the par? That ultimately, again, is a subject of machlokas. Rabosai, will the Eretz Hashem resolve that in tomorrow's dam? Shkoyach. Rabosai, just a reminder, tomorrow is a Sunday schedule, so davening is 7:15. In Eretz Hashem, the daf will begin a few minutes before 8 o'clock. Shkoyach.